Their illusions were delicately designed, paper-thin masks dressed in confidence, but they couldn't withstand the presence of someone unafraid to walk naked in their truth. You didn't have to call out their lies. You didn't need to confront the facade head-on. Truth never shouts. It simply arrives, quiet, unyielding, and when you stood in yours, it was like sunrise breaking through a long, manufactured night. Their carefully constructed identities began to crumble, not because you exposed them, but because your existence made deception impossible to maintain. They weren't ready to see how fragile their worlds really were, but your presence? It was a mirror, a reckoning, a force they couldn't ignore. They had grown comfortable in their castles of pretense, crowned themselves rulers of hollow domains. But then you entered, not to battle, not to prove, but simply to be. And that was enough, because authenticity has a gravity that disorients the false. They could no longer pretend, not with your light revealing every shadow they had hidden behind. They thought they were in control. They thought they held the pen. But you were the author all along. You didn't disrupt their narrative. Your truth made their fiction unreadable. Your presence is a frequency that unmasks the fraudulent. You are a silent disruptor, a living truth. You don't have to say a word. The room shifts as soon as you arrive. People get nervous, not because you've done anything, but because they feel something. You carry a mirror in your aura, a reflection they can't escape, and that reflection exposes everything they've buried. The insecurities, the unresolved, the masks, the games. It's not intimidation, it's not competition, it's not jealousy, though they may call it that. It's the quiet confrontation of your clarity versus their confusion. Your alignment forces a reckoning. Your wholeness exposes their fragmentation. They weren't ready to be seen, but your presence doesn't ask for permission. It simply reveals. You weren't trying to shake their world, but when you walk in truth, illusions tremble. You didn't change the game. You were the game. They thought they could manipulate the board, make the rules, control the outcome. But every move they made was within the realm you had already defined. You weren't loud about your strategy. You didn't show your hand. You didn't need to, because when you are the game, everyone else is just trying to keep up. While they scrambled for control, you moved with precision. While they chased short-term wins, you played for legacy. You were never outplayed. They were outclassed, operating in a dimension they didn't even realize existed. And now that the results are unfolding, they're left wondering how it all slipped through their hands. But you know the truth. It was never theirs to hold. The silence was not your downfall. It was divine design. They mistook your stillness for stagnation, thought your quiet was confusion. But silence is where the sacred things grow. You were being refined, not forgotten. While they shouted for attention, you listened for direction. While they performed, you prepared. While they scattered energy chasing recognition, you cultivated power in the dark. You were hidden in plain sight for a reason. Protected, positioned, being built. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was everything. And now? You're stepping forward with the strength of every quiet battle, every tear that never fell publicly, every night you chose growth over noise. They thought you were missing, but you were marinating in purpose. Now you emerge, and they realize the silence was the loudest part of your story. You didn't stumble upon success. You endured unseen battles. They observe your achievements and assume they came effortlessly, like a fortunate break. They overlook the struggles you faced in solitude, the sleepless nights, the silent tears, the overwhelming doubts. They remain unaware of the burdens you bore, the moments you contemplated giving up but chose to persevere. They see the outcome but not the arduous path you traversed. Redwood Inc. +1 SUNY Empire University +1. They witnessed the polished finish line, not the blood, sweat, and broken fragments you overcame to stand upright. Luck played no role. You didn't arrive here by chance. You earned every step through persistence, grit, and an unwavering refusal to be defeated. While they basked in comfort, you were in the trenches. While they rested, you pressed on. You didn't reach this point by catching breaks. You arrived because you understood the importance of perseverance when every part of you yearned to pause. You survived when others would have surrendered. You didn't merely endure the storms, you learned to thrive within them. What's even more remarkable is how effortlessly you made it appear. You smiled amidst the pain, projected composure when everything was unraveling internally. People saw your confidence, poise, and success, assuming it was handed to you. They failed to see the scars narrating a different tale. They didn't witness how you rose after each fall. They didn't observe the silent battles you fought. That wasn't luck, it was survival. Now, with every triumph, you're not just succeeding, you're demonstrating that resilience can't be fabricated, it's earned in the quiet moments when no one is watching. But what really happened? You stopped apologizing. You stopped editing yourself. You stopped diluting your truth to make others comfortable. You stopped playing roles in stories you didn't write. You didn't glow up, you came home to yourself. You didn't evolve, you stripped away everything that wasn't you. Now your essence walks into rooms before you do. It speaks in your silence. It radiates in your boundaries. It sings through your discernment. And people feel it, not because you shout, but because your spirit no longer asks for permission. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to be seen by those who can truly see. 3. They couldn't profit from your peace, so they ignored you. They couldn't monetize your stillness, couldn't benefit from your depth, so they dismissed it. Because in a world that praises performance, your refusal to dance for attention was threatening. You weren't dramatic. You weren't loud. You weren't a spectacle. You were intentional. You didn't chase validation. You chased healing. You weren't collecting followers. You were collecting clarity. And in doing so, you made yourself invisible to those who only value noise. But what they didn't realize is this: silence is a weapon. Stillness is sacred. You weren't inactive. You were preparing, sharpening, aligning. And now, as the results begin to echo across timelines and tables they no longer sit at, they're stunned. Because they never saw the process, only the parts they could label. And even those, they misunderstood. Now they remember you. Suddenly they want to check in, reconnect, pretend they always saw the spark. But the truth is, they never had the capacity to value what wasn't loud. They never had the vision to recognize what wasn't convenient. And now that your influence is undeniable, they can't sit at the table you built. 4. Your absence revealed what your presence never could. Awaken, divine soul. The time has come. They never saw it coming. Not because it was hidden, but because their pride blinded them to your becoming. They scoffed while you held silence like sacred ground. They whispered behind curtains as you endured unseen battles. They played gods, painting illusions of strength, while you bled truths in the shadows. But now the echoes of your return crash into their reality like thunder. The very essence they tried to dim. It was the blueprint, the fire, the answer, the one thing they couldn't duplicate, manipulate, or replace. Understand this. This was never about revenge. It was always about revelation, truth, the peeling away of every illusion, every facade, every mask they wore to shield themselves from your light. Because let's be honest, you didn't come from power. You became it, not by demand, but by divine unfolding. You didn't scream. You didn't perform. You didn't force. You moved with silence, with spirit, with soul. So now, your return is louder than any noise they've ever made. Hey, waking up, confused, disoriented, agitated, trying to pinpoint the shift in the air, wondering why their circles are crumbling, why peace feels foreign, why nothing aligns. And the answer is simple. The peace they called replaceable was you. The energy they believed optional was foundational. You weren't part of the structure, you were the structure. And now that you've pulled your light back, all they hear is collapse. Let's make something clear. You never tried to be chosen. You were chosen. Before their egos had language for what you are. Before their mouths could articulate what their spirits feared. Now the storm doesn't come from the sky. It rises from within you. Because there's a fire that no longer burns to destroy. It burns to reveal. You were lied on, counted out, used, and still, you didn't fold. They imitated your style but couldn't capture your essence. They observed your demeanor, attire, speech, and believed they could replicate it. They assumed that by mimicking your style, words, or energy, they could access your power. But they overlooked that style isn't the secret, essence is. They attempted to emulate your vibe, adopt your mannerisms, mirror your rhythm. Yet, regardless of their efforts, they couldn't grasp what made you unique. Your essence isn't something that can be imitated or duplicated. It's forged from your experiences, the battles you've faced, the wounds you've healed, the resilience you've cultivated. Your essence isn't a fleeting trend. It's the culmination of your pain, purpose, and unwavering determination. You didn't arrive here by following trends. You persevered through genuine struggles, built resilience, and adopted a mindset that refused to yield. That's what they missed. They believed they could adopt the appearance without understanding that it was a reflection of something deeper. Your walk isn't about style. It's about standing tall after countless setbacks. Your speech isn't for effect. It's filled with conviction, each word carrying the weight of your journey. Your energy isn't borrowed. It's the force of someone who has endured trials and emerged stronger. They tried to replicate what you possess, but they didn't realize your essence isn't easily acquired, it's earned. They can mimic the surface, but they'll never access the depth. They'll never comprehend the solitary hours, the silent doubts, the sacrifices made without recognition. And that's what renders you incomparable. They'll never replicate your journey. You were always the blueprint, but blueprints don't construct themselves. They saw potential in you, the possibility to achieve greatness. They perceived the outline, the raw materials, believing they were witnessing a work in progress. What they failed to grasp was that you weren't merely potential, you were already the blueprint. You were the foundation, the design, the plan. You embodied everything they aspired to, everything they required. But they couldn't recognize it at the time. They thought you were waiting to be built up, awaiting the right opportunity or person to validate your worth. What they missed was that while they were waiting, you were creating. You weren't seeking permission or recognition. You were constructing your reality, brick by brick. You weren't just dreaming, you were executing. You were diligently working while they deliberated on how to utilize your energy. They saw the blueprint, but you were already laying the foundation. While they awaited external validation, you were building your world. You didn't need confirmation because you knew you were the structure all along. You weren't waiting for someone to affirm your worth, you already knew it. In the time they spent seeking guidance on how to leverage you, you became the architect of your success. You didn't wait for permission to shape your life. You didn't wait for titles or labels. You built yourself, piece by piece. Now, those who once saw only potential watch you access opportunities they never anticipated. They were waiting for you to be constructed, but you were the builder all along. You became formidable when you healed. They never comprehended your silence. They mistook it for weakness, retreat, or surrender. But they failed to see that you weren't vanishing, you were transforming. While they thought you were hiding, you were healing. You were recalibrating, resetting, and recharging. You were shedding old layers, discarding what no longer served you. This is not anger. This is clarity. And yours is here. So don't shrink. Don't justify your glow. Don't dilute your presence. They see you now. And the question is, what will you do with the power they never believed you could hold? 1. You were never hidden. You were just never seen clearly. You existed in plain sight, present, alive, whole. But their vision was distorted by ego, insecurity, and outdated expectations. They saw projections, not reality. Their version of greatness was shallow, noisy, performative. You were too pure, too quiet, too patient, too real. So they misjudged you. They labeled your depth as emptiness, your stillness as insignificance, your process as passivity. They caught glimpses and mistook them for your whole. But now those blind spots are dissolving. One by one, their narratives are crumbling. And suddenly, the moves you made in silence make sense. The wisdom they once mocked now echoes in their mouths. And no, it's not because you changed. It's because they finally got quiet enough to hear. Your presence didn't grow louder. Their distractions just faded. And now they're scrambling, trying to rewrite the story. But the truth won't bend. 2. You didn't level up. You remembered who you are. This wasn't a transformation. This was a return to the essence beneath the noise, the self before the trauma, before the conditioning, before they told you to shrink, to settle, to behave. The real you was never lost, only buried. And now that you've remembered, there's no unseeing, no going back. That's why they stare. That's why they whisper. They think you've changed. That something external sparked this power. Now they want you back. But they've already shown you who they are. Now that your light is too bright to ignore, they circle back, conveniently remembering your name, your value, your presence. But they weren't there in the soil. They didn't water your growth. They only returned for the bloom. They watched you become, but they weren't part of your becoming. They dismissed the seed, doubted the sprout, and now chase the flower. But a garden doesn't forget who neglected it. Don't be seduced by nostalgia. Memory will play tricks when you're lonely or soft-hearted. But remember who clapped for you only after the spotlight came on. They had the chance to love you in raw form. They chose silence. Now you owe them the same. Let them admire from a distance. You are not who you were. You've evolved. And they no longer qualify for the new version of you. You weren't just a survivor. You are a force of nature. Every silence, every shadow, every setback, they were all shaping you for this moment. You were never small. You were sacred, misunderstood, maybe, but never misplaced. Now you move with clarity, with conviction, with unshakable knowing. They wrote you off, but you rewrote the script. And this is your crescendo. You're not asking for a seat at their table anymore. You're building your own. one forged in truth, purpose, and power. Let them watch, let them wonder, let them regret. You've arrived, not with vengeance, but with vision. They mistook humility for weakness. Now, they're grappling with the stark contrast. Because you were quiet, they assumed you lacked strength. Because you didn't compete, they saw no threat. Your grounded, patient demeanor was misinterpreted as insignificance. They failed to see that genuine strength doesn't seek attention. True power doesn't need to shout. Essay Pro +2 SUNY Empire University +2 Reascriber Textos +2. You weren't aiming to outshine anyone. You were committed to staying true to yourself. In a world dominated by noise and ego, your authenticity was unsettling. They labeled it weakness because it lacked arrogance. They believed you lacked confidence because you weren't performing. They thought you were unaware of your worth because you didn't seek validation. But you knew your value intimately. You didn't need external approval. You didn't have to remind others of your contributions. You were the foundation. Now that you've embraced your truth, they struggle to comprehend it. Those who once overlooked you now face the undeniable contrast. Your inherent power is now too evident to ignore. You're not boasting, you're simply being. You're not forcing, you're progressing. And the impact is profound because you no longer require their platform. You've discovered your own. You're not louder, you're clearer. And that clarity is unsettling their foundations as they grapple with the image they constructed of you. They're compelled to reassess everything they believed, as the humble individual they deemed harmless possesses deep roots, sharp insight, and a presence that doesn't demand. It transforms. SUNY Empire University +4 Happy Organized Life +4 Medium +4. You didn't become arrogant. You ceased to diminish yourself. Now, the truth resonates louder than the noise they once used to overshadow you. While you were there, they smiled, nodded, maybe even clapped, but they weren't really listening. They didn't value your presence. They assumed it. They relied on it. They drained it. You carried peace like breath, energy like balance, wisdom like gravity, but they grew accustomed to the flow you created, until you left. And in your absence, the imbalance screamed. The silence shouted what your words never could. And now, they sit in the echo, trying to grasp how something they thought was extra turned out to be essential. But you're not looking back, because you know what they missed. You know who you are. You always did. You just finally stopped letting their blindness define your brilliance. And now that the veil has lifted, walk boldly. Let your power speak, not for revenge, but for remembrance. You are the one they never saw coming, the one they couldn't box, break, or brand. And your rise isn't noise, it's prophecy fulfilled. It was always you, the invisible force ensuring everything stayed in harmony, the one they unconsciously depended upon. Then you departed. In the void you left behind, truths began to surface. They had constructed illusions about their identities, significance, and stability. Your absence dismantled those illusions. When you ceased to nurture what wasn't yours, they were compelled to confront what they'd long ignored. Without your support, they faced their own disarray. Without your presence, they had to confront reality, not convenience. You had nothing to prove, no need for explanations. Your departure was your most profound statement. In that silence, everything was unveiled. The insincere support, the one-sided efforts, the manipulative games. Your presence was strength, your absence, revelation. Only then did the facade crumble. They realized it wasn't them holding things together, it was you. Now, in your absence, they're confronted with truths they previously denied.